Hello to all our viewers. Thank you for joining this IOSG 8th Old Friends Reunion event. Today we'll be exploring scaling DeFi and whether and how scalability solutions can trigger that next wave of DeFi innovation. And I have the pleasure of being joined by 4 distinguished guests from the world of DeFi, from the world of Ethereum. They've been building products for years and really know the challenges of building on these open, decentralized platforms and the challenges around scaling. And scaling while trying to keep it as open as permissionless as possible. And today I'm joined by Kain from Synthetix, Robert from Liquity, Yenwen from Perpetual Protocol, and Rune from MakerDAO. Guys, thank you for joining us. Could you maybe briefly give a very short introduction of yourselves to our audience? Kain, maybe we can start with you, going clockwise.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Sounds good. I'm Kain from Synthetix. We are a derivatives platform on Ethereum, and now also running on Optimism as well. So we allow people to get exposure to a range of different assets like gold, silver, Bitcoin on the Ethereum blockchain and the optimistic Ethereum blockchain.
Great, thank you. Robert?
I'm Robert Lauko. I'm the CEO and founder of Liquity. Liquity is an interest-free borrowing protocol that allows you to borrow LUSD, which is a stable coin, against Ether. And like the main selling point is that the loans are interest-free and also the collateral ratio is relatively low at 110%.
Yeah, Yenwen?
Hi, I'm the co-founder of Perpetual Protocol, and so we are building a decentralized perpetual contract on-chain. Our V1 is built on top of Sky, and then we are actually working on V2 right now, and the V2 will be on Optimism.
Great, thank you. Rune?
I'm Rune Christensen, and I'm the co-founder of MakerDAO, which is a stablecoin platform and DeFi protocol. I used to be the CEO of the foundation, but I'm not anymore because that has dissolved because Maker at this point has become so decentralized that basically the community took over hiring people, sort of running the whole thing, which is pretty cool because it's a very advanced stablecoin system, but it's not controlled by a single team. And the thing that makes it unique is that it's primarily backed by Ethereum, but it's also using a bunch of different collateral assets, including centralized stablecoins that allow to stay one-to-one pegged to the dollar with sort of unlimited liquidity. And also we're moving into using what we call real-world assets, which would be actual financial assets like real estate in the real world. And even with that, we even are moving towards trying to focus on sustainable finance.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool that all those projects that started 2017, 18, we were saying decentralization is a journey and over time you get more and more decentralized. And you guys are showing that in action. Over time, it has become gradually more decentralized. So yeah, it's really cool to see that. Now, before we jump into what kind of innovation we can see once we do manage to scale up, maybe we should go back to the root of the question and think about how we scale. Because at the end of the day, we're all bound by this blockchain trilemma, right? Which says you can have scalability, decentralization, and security. You can improve one or two different aspects, but it always comes at the price of the other, right? So when we do try and decentralize Ethereum, decentralize what's happening in DeFi, how should we be thinking about this trilemma? What kind of compromises are acceptable? And how should we be thinking about this for the long-term sustainable growth of this? Who would like to kick us off?
I can
happy to. Go ahead, Rune. You're good.
Okay, so yeah, so I want to make a point on this, like to trilemma. I mean, I think another way to talk about this is like this common argument of decentralization is a spectrum. We hear it all the time, right? And basically, my opinion on this has always been that it's a spectrum, yeah, but I think it's quite limited how useful it is to really look at all these different points in, let's call it, the middle of the spectrum. And I actually believe that for a very long time, we've had the combination that, in my opinion, works the best, which is you have blockchains that are actually decentralized, you can actually count on to even you know, to handle very sort of negative scenarios. So should we talk about the Ethereum mainnet, you know, rollups, which is this type of scalability technology that doesn't compromise on security. And if you don't want that, if you don't want absolute best-in-class security, then you're probably better off using a regulated centralized exchange, right? Coinbase, Binance. I mean, they have they have incredible scalability, and they've had that for, I mean, it's not exactly new technology, right? It's been like that for like a decade at this point. And I actually think the combination of these two things, that already handles the trilemma really well, because it allows users to sort of pick the spot where they, they're most comfortable with, which actually for most people, that is just, in many cases, is to stick with centralized exchanges, right? You kind of have to really know what you're doing to actually use the real sort of the bare bones blockchain technology, right? And then the risk that comes with that in terms of user error. And I think in order to know where you're supposed to go in the middle of a spectrum, I actually think that requires even more knowledge, because how exactly are you supposed to know, like, okay, this is not as secure as Ethereum, but but there's still all kind of risks around my own sort of knowledge and skills, but I'm also not getting the protections of a centralized, regulated platform, right? So, in my opinion, that it really comes down to what's appropriate for the user, and yeah, like I think there's more to it than just what often is presented as you can do. It's a blockchain, it's the same thing, but it's faster, and there's some simple security trade-offs you don't have to worry too much about.
Yeah,
I
guess.
Go ahead. I have a slight counterpoint maybe to that, where I think we get confused sometimes about who the users are of these systems, right? Like, we talk about users not understanding the trade-offs of decentralization, security, et cetera. I think the users that we're referring to when we talk about, the scalability trilemma are actually engineers who are building things, right? It's the people who are the user of a blockchain is the person who wants to build a platform on it, and how much trust do they believe that the platform needs? What are they trying to achieve? How much censorship resistance, et cetera? Like all of those things. Users, like, I think that the conversation about like users not caring about decentralization is fairly true. They just want to use platforms that are safe and secure, transparent, all of the things that we're trying to achieve in DeFi. And so, I think people kind of using centralized platforms like, Binance or whatever, or even centralized blockchains like Binance Smart Chain, and something like that. It's a trade-off that a user might make without really understanding, to your point, like what, where on the curve they lie, right? And they're foregoing security, maybe, for some benefit in like, cheaper transactions or whatever. So I do think that like this situation we find ourselves in right now is very confusing for an end user, but like the users, engineers who are building these things, I think that they are much further along in this education process of understanding, where these trade-offs lie and what makes sense to use in terms of which blockchain to deploy on.
I largely agree with that view, and I also think that decentralization and security are maybe not at the same level, because you can have security without decentralization, but you cannot really, like, decentralization on its own is not really useful if the system is not secure. So there is kind of this difference between the two aspects, and some users, they might just not care because they are fine as long as the system is secure. They don't care whether the security is derived from a legal entity that's just trustworthy or a system of decentralized nodes. I mean, that's one aspect, but another one I like to emphasize here is like there is also, like, from a technical point of view, like a difference between scaling up and scaling out. There are platforms like Solana that are just trying to push the boundaries regarding the throughput of one single chain. So they are kind of then also pushing the requirements for the node or node operators on that system, which may impair decentralization because it's not open for everyone running like a node at home in his cellar. But at the same time, it's a very neat system in the way that you do not need to care about atomicity, about cross-chain transfers, because on the other hand, those other like endeavors which try to like shard a system or like layer 2 solutions for Ethereum, they just become complicated and segregated, and then yeah, you lose this kind of easy way to have atomic and composable transactions.
Yeah, and I mean there are multiple scaling solutions coming out there as well. And when we do have technologies like zero knowledge proofs coming out, it kind of expands the boundary of what we can do, right? So over time, we're just increasing that toolkit that we have, and that's really cool to see as well. Like one question to you guys is, because all your products kind of touch on liquidity, they do require some kind of, let's say, capital, ERC20 tokens or whatever it might be, to kind of function efficiently. And we're seeing multiple layer 2 solutions coming out there. We have sidechains like Polygon. It's really expanded, and we're seeing the TVL grow up there. So do you guys see a risk of fragmenting that liquidity, and with it maybe fragmenting usability? How is it going to look like in a few years down the line? Do you see like a few dominant layer 2 solutions being out there, or is it going to be just hundreds of different ones? Or do you think it might be more like a winner takes all? How do you guys see what will play out in the near future?
Yeah, I think I will go first. I personally believe that there will be like winner takes all, just like Ethereum actually takes the most of the market right now. I think the network effect, I mean, layer 2, if you want to be composable on, I mean, with other projects, you have to be on the same like layer 2 solution or same chain or the same place. So I do believe that that effect, I mean, the first one to get the network effect will be the winner takes all, and then there probably will be like maybe 40% of the market that actually, I mean, buy like several like smaller ones, but there will definitely be like one like winner overall. Yeah, that's my take.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I think like, you know, we saw in DeFi summer, and even over the last 2 years, liquidity is very fickle, right? It'll go wherever the incentives are very, very quickly. And, you know, even though liquidity fragmentation is, you know, this kind of thing that everyone's concerned about, it's very easy to defragment liquidity as well, right? With the right incentives and the right mechanisms. And so I think that it'll happen. There'll be some tipping point, and we're not there yet. You know, it's not clear whether it's going to be, you know, Arbitrum or Optimism or Starknet or, you know, one of the other, you know, L2 solutions that's out there. It's probably not going to be XDAI. You know, it's cool, but I think that, you know, we're at a point now where, you know, it could be like Hermes on Polygon. Like, we just don't know. At the moment, there's a lot of uncertainty. There will be a tipping point, though, I think, where it becomes winner take most, and then probably trends towards winner take all.
Yeah, and I think that I think specifically it's gonna be the like I would guess this is not gonna happen so much with optimistic rollups, just because they already. I'm not enough of an expert to sort of know exactly what their technology is going to look like several years out, right? But we already have those fee issues almost with them now, right? Where they're like, and I think there's even an upgrade coming that's going to make them cheaper than Solana or something. I've read about that on Twitter. People are excited about that. But ultimately, I mean, what I've heard about the zero knowledge rollups, right, is that we're talking about like a new sort of paradigm of throughput, right? Where they're doing things on, I don't know if you've seen these demos they've done on Starknet, right, of reinforcement learning agents and that kind of stuff, where they sort of showcase that this is because this is essentially just a single server, right, that is kept secure but with the cryptography, right? Then you can just do a completely different set of stuff that you just cannot do on like a traditional blockchain, right? And I would guess that that's also where we get into this conversation about once you're in that paradigm, and once you get sort of used to this being, you know, you having these new possibilities, that's where we might see this new behavior, like these new types of products, new behaviors emerge. And that's when I would guess that you really have that possibility of a proper sort of lock-in, like a new Ethereum that sort of becomes the hub for whatever happens when you have this new sort of order of magnitude of throughput. And when, I mean, at the same time, I really think that if you look at something like the optimistic rollups, it seems kind of logical in a sense that they will actually load balance more, right? And you'll have I've seen this like argument about like, what is it, like the, you know, Manhattan and the suburbs and the countryside kind of, where depending on where, like some apps, they need cheap transactions. They don't need so much composability. Others, they're happy to take more expensive transactions if they get better composability. And you might see like a spectrum of different rollups that specialize in being higher, you know, higher cost, higher composability, or lower cost, lower composability. And then even a kind of specialization. So maybe some will be more about swapping random tokens. Some will be more about, let's just trade Ethereum here. Others will be NFTs or something, right? And then you get these specializations of ecosystems. I mean, that's, in some ways, I think that would be the nicest outcome in a sense, because it just feels more decentralized. But I could also totally imagine you have Starknet or CK Sync in this sort of race to build the first, you know, ultra rollup of Doom. And then once that comes out, it's just like, that's a new thing and it changes the whole game. Will be exciting to see how it plays out, at least.
Yeah. And I mean, just to follow up on that, so assuming we do get there and the technology keeps advancing and we have 100x scalability, what kind of new DeFi applications are likely to emerge from that kind of new capacity, new capability that we have?
Yeah, maybe I can see two examples. Just, I mean, I'm sure there are many more, but one is like currently we have a number of DeFi applications that need a lot of care from the user. Like, for example, borrowing systems, CDPs, where you can get liquidated if your collateral falls below like a certain threshold. Now, there are already automation toolings out there like DeFi Saver, but I mean, the gas costs can be prohibitive for some of those tools to like constantly manage, like update your position, like let's say every minute or even every second, because that's what in the end allows the system to take on more risk because the users can react to it quicker. So I guess like those kind of automation systems may emerge with higher scalability. And also another thing that I think will re-emerge will be on-chain order book trading, because currently Uniswap, I think, is kind of an answer to Ethereum's low scalability, and it tries to like mimic it now with version 3, but it's still not the real deal like when it comes to order book trading.
You're really dating yourself there, calling them CDPs. We call them vaults now. They haven't been CDPs for like 2 years.
Yeah. Just wanted to use like a generic term.
Yeah, you use the generic term now, right?
Yeah.
And maybe I can ask, like, for your own products, do you guys see it? Do you guys see extra features, extra capabilities coming to your own specific products once we do have 100x the capacity there?
Yeah. I mean, Perpetual Protocol we built on SKY, I mean, like V1 last year, so the end of last year. So I do feel that the cheaper cost, because on SKY, the gas fee is like 100x lower than mainnet. So we do see that. I mean, we don't really incentivize anything, but we do get like much higher transaction volume than other like similar projects. I do feel that it's actually, I mean, just because of a cheaper fee. So yeah, so it's just like Robert said, that people can do, I mean, things like every block, they can actually submit transaction, I mean, like adjust their position every block. That actually enhance lots of things. So I do believe that by like, if we can scale like 100x, I mean, on a layer 2, I mean, like all the AM, like Uniswap, they will get like 10x like trading volume if everyone move to that solution. So that's something I'm pretty much, I mean, certain about that. But I do have a concern about order book. I still don't think that order book will happen soon on chain. I mean, even on like Solana, I mean, they can process like 1,000 like transaction per second, but there's still a cost. I mean, to update order book, and compared to a centralized exchange, they don't have that cost. So it actually limit their ability to operate that order book for the market maker or for the like quant traders and others. So I kind of feel that if we can have like more than like a 10K, I mean, transaction per second or even more, that can suit that situation, but I don't think that will happen. And I do believe that AMM will kind of like dominate the decentralized like DEX market. That's just what I feel. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we all agree that scalability is incredibly important for mainstream adoption in the future. But I'm trying to gauge, as of now, for example, if instantly tomorrow we had 100x capacity, would that be filled immediately? Where is the demand and supply now? Yeah, we know the supply needs to keep increasing. We have to increase the transactions per second. Where do we stand on the demand side?
Yeah, let me try to actually, I want to make a bit of a, what do you call it, a little bit of a spicy point to this.
Go ahead.
So first, like, and actually from the perspective of like Maker, and what are we gonna get when we properly expand to L2s? And like, actually, so I just earlier made the point that maybe there'll be this new paradigm of completely new things we've never seen before that'll be possible on, CK rollups or something. But concretely right now, it basically looks like it allows Maker to serve smaller users, like users with less capital, basically. And that's pretty much about it. And the reality is actually that Maker has already sort of established itself, like it's just primarily focused on serving really, really large users that then themselves provide these centralized services to end users, right? So I think it's about half of all Ethereum collateral in Maker is actually already, in a sense, scaled up this way, where like you have these centralized providers that they basically arbitrage rates that they provide to end users with marketing, regulated products, sort of this kind of stuff that a regular person that maybe would be scared to jump out on the blockchain, they can just go to these kind of services directly. And so what an L2 and sort of what very massive scalability would allow us to do would be, okay, now we can serve a kind of user that they don't want to use some kind of centralized intermediary. They want to directly use the blockchain and have cheap fees and get the best service possible. And I'm like, I don't think it's even guaranteed that this is necessarily that big of a user base, actually, because I think there's it sort of makes sense that the people who are confident and comfortable doing highly risky, potentially risky technical operations manually, right, on a blockchain, it just tends to be those that are well capitalized and sort of know what they're doing, right? And some random person that has a bit of money in ETH, they might not necessarily be so into, like they might actually prefer going on Binance or something like that, right? That where they have a brand they can trust. And so, but there is a type of product that absolutely needs to be able to offer fully decentralized service directly to the end user, right? And it's actually the thing that's pretty much, right now it's one of the most popular things to use blockchain for, and that's basically Ponzi schemes, right? If you look at what's happening today, it's people like to joke about it kind of, but the reality is that so much of the stuff that's happening out there, so much of like the recent innovation in crypto, right? It's like, it's basically financial gamification primarily, right? So it's making all these like crazy new ways to sort of kind of gamble, right? It's in between finance and gambling, and you put them together in all these different forms, and you get this like explosion of it looks like an explosion of innovation. And I guess it is in the field specifically of financial gamification. And my point is that these will just completely explode with L2 scalability, and they already are, right? And we're seeing that already. And then the question is that actually sustainable? I don't think that we can be sure that this will actually always be the case, but at least in the short run, I would imagine that it might not necessarily be that we see L2 and then all this like new, innovation that, helps society or something or fixes the financial system is going to pop up, and actually be more like a bunch of people will lose their money, actually, because the reason why a Ponzi scheme is so happy to attract these small holders with not a lot of capital is because they're not exactly sharks, right? They're actually the people. They're hoping for these people to be their exit liquidity, essentially. And I think that's also a lot of the criticism that's being thrown at Ethereum is like, look, we need the small fish so they can be our exit liquidity. Basically. So overall, I just, I think that's a perspective that also matters. I think that it's, there's a side to all of this and what's happening right now in the bull market that's, I think, we're gonna look a bit different once sort of the froth and the irrational behavior disappears.
Yeah.
You become so cynical in your old age, Rune.
Yeah.
And I mean, Kain, Synthetix has been one of the beneficiaries of these scaling solutions, right? We know that quite a bit of your volume comes from a layer 2 because Ethereum, we know how expensive that is. So how has that helped growth from maybe, how do you see growth from where you're standing and Synthetix?
I mean, it's only just starting now, right? You know, we've had probably the last 6 months where trading on L1 has been, you know, so prohibitive as to basically be pointless, right? There's been like cross asset swaps and some other like weird edge case kind of uses for the protocol. But other than that, you know, the average users left and went to L2 a while ago. But there was no trading activity. It's only been in the last, you know, couple of months that we've enabled trading, and there's only 3 assets on L2. So, you know, there's still quite a bit of work to kind of rebuild that infrastructure on L2 that existed on L1, you know, even 18 months ago. But one of the things that we've been able to do is remove this like front running protection that has been there for several years, which like broke atomic transactions. So it stopped the protocol from being composable. And that's meant that already we're seeing other protocols start to you know, integrate Synthetix, like Lyra, for example, the options protocol, which in and of itself is actually an innovation, right? Because they've taken this kind of internal hedging model that was previously not viable on L1 because, you know, the computational requirements for Black-Scholes are just not possible, and they've been able to replicate, you know, those calculations on L2 to have this dynamic hedging function that the protocol itself does. So, you know, not every innovation is a Ponzi. Yes, most of them are probably, you know, and these kind of crazy primitives that we're seeing that people are building, you know, are cool and weird little zero-sum games that people are playing. But, you know, there is genuine innovation, and I think we're like, we barely scratch the surface on L2s as people, you know, in the same way that there's genuine innovation on L1, right? Like people said Uniswap was not a real thing for like such a long time, right? It can't work, it's dumb, you know, it's nonsense, and you know, it's been most of those people have been proven wrong. So I do think L2, as you like scale up, you know, transaction throughput, but also like computational bandwidth as well, will enable a range of new things that people haven't yet thought of.
Yeah, I mean, we all know that there's so much happening and scaling is happening, and it's actually scary to think about what would have happened to Ethereum gas price if we had none of the scaling solutions come to market just yet. I can't even imagine, because even today, so much of the load is off onto L2s and sidechains, yet Ethereum gas prices still are considerably high. Now, I mean, we don't live in a bubble, and we could talk about Ethereum and its ecosystem layer 2s all day, and we're super bullish on this. But outside of that, we know that there are natively fast layer 1s out there, right? And if you go on crypto Twitter, you're seeing all these different arguments about people abandoning this and that. So I wanted to take your view on how you see the whole ecosystem growing with those other L1s in the picture. Again, we touched on L2s maybe being like a winner takes all situation. Is it no different for L1s as well? Are they're competing with Ethereum? Do you guys still think it will be an Ethereum and its ecosystem wins and takes it all, or can they coexist? No one wants to touch this controversial subject. Yeah, go ahead, Robert.
I think layer 1s have maybe an advantage when like they apply like those sharding techniques, when they want to offer like an out of the box, neat and easy solution to the end user, because I mean, they can try to like at least make the impression from the outside that it's like just one monolithic system, while like under the hood, it's maybe composed of different subnetworks and charts and whatnot. So they have this advantage, which I think could make them a real competitor in the long run. Whereas on Ethereum now you have like multiple projects competing with their layer 2 solutions. Like they're all kind of trying to plug into the mainnet, like at least be rooted there. And then, yeah, the question is like fragmentation of liquidity, of course, but also like the whole atomicity that we already touched upon. yeah, I think that makes it harder. I mean, if you have like multiple parties working on the same thing but in a different way, it's just maybe more chaotic than what like one layer one network could achieve, also from like an end user perspective.
Yeah. I mean, do you think it's the case that maybe the network effect has become so big for Ethereum, like the gravity is so big that organically there's more developers coming into it every day than any VC might be able to kind of pay for on any other chain, right? And just on a side note, like, do you guys see any organic growth happening on other chains? Because at some point it has to happen, right? I mean, it should happen if you want product market fit. How do you see this?
Yeah, I think there's organic growth happening, right? Like, you know, I had this debate maybe 9 months ago with, or 7 months ago with like Kyle from Multicoin, right? Like, you know, and back then, I'm not going to mention my other friends that I've had debates with recently, but back then, you know, it was very early, right? And it was like, maybe there is some organic activity. I think now it's pretty undeniable, right? There's organic engineering activity happening on Solana for all kinds of reasons. Same thing with Avalanche, you know, same thing with a number of other L1s that are starting to kind of get some you know, genuine adoption. Is it yet through like a critical mass where it's self-sustaining? I doubt it. I don't think so, right? Like, it's being sustained by, you know, some incentives and you know, tokenization of those L1s and all kinds of things that we don't have for L2s yet, right? Like, L2s don't have tokens yet. I mean, I think there's one that has a token, but you know, that's a very powerful incentive that doesn't exist yet in the L2 ecosystem that does for every L1 by definition. And so, you know, you have some organic activity, it is growing, and you know, it's really like Ethereum, it's the Ethereum community's game to lose here, right? Like, if we are able to kind of get to a point where we can scale up and stay ahead of them enough, I think that Ethereum likely wins. But you know, if we have a situation like we've had with E2, I mean, as Rune was talking before, I had this like horrifying like image of like Jing and Steven standing up at like DevCon 8 or something like that and being like, we're about to transition to like zero knowledge proofs, right? Like, in, you know, it takes like 2 years or 5 years or something like that to happen. So like, I do think we could easily be in a situation where rollups get some traction, but then we're trying to transition to some other technology and it takes way longer than we think. And you know, this chasing scalability problem opens up opportunities for a new blockchain to turn up that's like blank slate, and it's just going to be faster by definition, right? There's less activity. You know, you could just fork Geth and run your version of Ethereum with like 50 people and it would be much faster, right? Until there's any activity on there. So like, this is a problem that I think, you know, is very hard to win. But I do think that it's something that, you know, the Ethereum community broadly needs to keep pushing, and we need to stay ahead of other L1s competitors.
Yeah,
and I just want to add to that about this concept of like winning and L1s and the competition between them, right? Because I mean, this is something I see quite a lot, and there's kind of two sides to this, and it tends to be that in Ethereum we like to talk about winning and losing and winner takes all. That's because we're the incumbent, and I'm an ETH maxi myself because I basically have to, because the Maker is built on Ethereum. And what I've come to realize is there's no realistic way for Maker to be this like multi-chain utopia where there's multiple L1s and then something like Maker actually being competitive on other L1s. And that's because it's basically L1s by definition are meant to not be like, they sort of give up composability with Ethereum in order to be able to re-engineer whatever they want from scratch. And sometimes it's like literally copy Geth and just pump their alternative basically. And it's like there's real competition because the bridges between L1s, they're just not good, and you can't really make them good basically. Like, and I've talked about, I can really get talking about this, like the multisig thing, right? Where the best way to basically bridge between L1s that have been discovered so far is with a multisig. And then there's all these like more innovative solutions, which in my opinion, they're worse than multisigs. Like, you're better off using a multisig because now you're really going down this path of just having no freaking way to determine what kind of security assumptions that you're taking when you're you know, playing around across whatever X many different L1s. And that by itself just means that once you get enough traction, like you're not gonna, like, people are not gonna pick using, you know, doing something across, like developers, right? They want to build something secure for their users, where they're not going to get in huge trouble because some random thing blows up and then suddenly people lose their money, right? They're going to much prefer building across a coherent network with sort of coherent security of an L1 with L2s. They're not going to build across like 3 different L1s. And they're, I mean, and that inherently means that if something like Solana, for instance, or Avalanche, right, which I guess are the big ones right now, they really manage to surpass Ethereum, it'll likely mean that you will actually have, I mean, they will really sort of, you know, they will actually take activity from Ethereum onto their own chains, because you'd rather do that than mess around with multi-sigs in the long run, especially, right? When it becomes more than just Ponzi schemes, right? When it really is about this like fundamental innovation that is happening, but of course it's just moving slower, and that it relies on, and it depends fundamentally on security.
Yeah.
I also want to add maybe that like projects like yours, like Maker, but also Liquity, they are not maybe as easy to scale in a multi-chain world, because like I think the only way you could do that in a really scalable manner would be to make it so that you can basically mint your currency on every single chain. So you have to have this weakest link issue that if one of the chains fails, then like the other like chains would be affected by it, or the whole system could break down. And I think there are just also some limitations stemming from the application itself, where it's not as easy as maybe just deploying Uniswap on many different chains, because they can like have their own living there. They don't need to rely on them like mutually on each other.
And I think it's still early enough that we will have breakthroughs in bridging technology, that there is some kind of solution that is better than what we have today. And I think overall, like, we do have to root for other blockchains that do bring true innovation to the table, right? It's all about having these thousands and thousands of experiments play out, and evolution tells us the best solutions will be used, will rise to the top. And I think that's what's going to end up happening. I don't think it will be a completely Ethereum on its own in a bubble where no one else is using it. There will be many multiple chains connected to it. They will have their strengths and weaknesses. And either way, I think it's a very exciting future for everyone involved, not just Ethereum, but in blockchain space as a whole. And on that note, thank you all for joining us, and we wrap up this panel. It's been great talking and hearing these different kind of thoughts and ideas about scalability. And until we see you next time, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.